Hello everyone, you are on the Auto Advisor channel. Here we talk about cars and how they work in simple words. Today we'll talk about what the EGR valve is and what the exhaust gas recirculation system is. There is a lot of controversy about this system, why it is needed and how it works. Many are even suggesting to turn it off immediately so that it does not consume more fuel and waste your power. The exhaust gas recirculation system was originally developed to reduce harmful emissions into the atmosphere. In order to understand how it works, you need to consider a couple of points. So, the first point is that in the air surrounding us, and so in the air that enters an engine, there are two main gases, nitrogen and oxygen. So if you place these gases in a closed space under the influence of high temperature, these gases will begin to react with each other and form toxic nitrogen compounds, nitric oxides. This is the first point. The second point is that the temperature in the combustion chamber directly depends on the amount of oxygen. It's very simple. So, what's the idea? The idea is that if we lower the temperature in the combustion chamber of the engine, then less of these compounds will form. And in order to lower the combustion temperature, we need to supply less oxygen to our engine. The structure of the EGR system is shown simplified here on the board. So, below is our internal combustion engine. This is the intake manifold that allows air to enter the engine. Let's draw an arrow. The ignition happens here, and the exhaust gases are discharged through the exhaust manifold. Here it is. This way gases are released. So, between these two pipes, there is an EGR valve which returns a small portion of exhaust gases to the engine's combustion chamber through the intake manifold. It turns out to be very interesting. The engine begins to breathe its own exhaust gases so that we can reduce the oxygen levels in the combustion chamber. When less oxygen enters the engine, the combustion temperature in the chamber decreases. And since the temperature drops, these harmful compounds do not form. Now it becomes clear that the EGR system reduces the power of the engine itself since it receives less oxygen. But in reality, the EGR valve and the system do not work all the time. In those times when you need more engine power or when there is an increased load on the engine, this valve is closed. The EGR system is installed on both gasoline and diesel engines. The only exception is the turbocharged gasoline engine. So, on gasoline engines, the EGR valve is open only at low and medium loads. On a diesel engine, this valve operates at idle and closes completely as the load increases. Thus, it turns out, as I already said, that in those modes, when the load on the engine is high, this system does not work and no power loss occurs. By the way, an interesting fact. On gasoline and diesel engines in warm-up mode, when the engine is still warming up to operating temperatures, this system also does not work. Now comes the fun part. The EGR system not only takes care of our environment and reduces the level of emissions of nitrogen compounds, but also has a number of advantages that optimize engine operation when it is turned on. So, for a gasoline engine, this system reduces the level of fuel detonation. What does it mean? At high temperatures in the combustion chamber, the fuel can spontaneously ignite, that is, ignite itself before a spark ignites it. And it's very bad. And as we have already found out, the EGR system reduces the temperature, so since we reduce the temperature in the combustion chamber, we also reduce the risk of detonation. The second point for a gasoline engine is that the EGR system helps the engine draw air into the intake manifold and thus reduces the pressure drops and saves fuel. Some sources claim that this saves you several percent of fuel. That is, as I said earlier, this is a very ambiguous system. And in this case, it even saves fuel. For a diesel engine, there is also one advantage. This system reduces the combustion pressure in the chamber at idle, and the diesel engine does not work, so to speak, so hard and so forcefully in that idle mode, where it does not need any power. This results in less wear of the engine. Let's talk now about the features of operation. Over time, after a certain mileage, approximately 1 to 200,000 kilometers, it depends on the region of operation, the quality of the fuel, and so on. This EGR valve, here I have it, begins to become clogged with soot and begins to work poorly. That is, it begins to close and open poorly and in the end gets stuck in one of the positions. All this leads to disruption of engine operation. It starts to idle poorly, it may choke, the speed may fluctuate, it may lose power in some modes, and in some cars, the computer even puts the engine into emergency mode. A new EGR valve is relatively expensive, so many car owners, as I said at the beginning of the video, simply try to turn it off. That is, such a damper is installed here. This valve, for example, is removed and the system stops working altogether. Buying a new valve or turning off the old one is your choice, but my recommendations are as follows. On older engines, you can turn off this valve, and the engine will work more or less normally. Why? Because old engines were designed way before, and then this EGR system was installed on them. New engines are more complex, and they were initially designed taking into account the EGR system. Therefore, it is not so easy to throw out this system from a new type of engine, and if you simply close this channel, your engine will stop working correctly. Therefore, problems begin with rewiring the computer and so on. As for me, for new engines, it's easier to buy a new valve and not bother. But again, the choice is yours. So, conclusions. The EGR system is a very beneficial system from an environmental point of view because it lowers the temperature in our combustion chamber and reduces emissions of these toxic nitrogen compounds. But it only works in some modes, or rather in those modes where the full engine power is not used. Therefore, in general, the system does not increase fuel consumption. Where maximum power is needed, it does not work and you use the power of your engine to the maximum. In addition, this system has a number of advantages. As I already described, for a gasoline engine, it reduces the level of detonation and also facilitates air intake. And for a diesel engine, it reduces wear at idle speed. As for deleting the system, I repeat once again, this is up to you. But for new engines starting from the year 2009 or 10, I do not recommend turning it off. It's easier to buy a new valve and then not to suffer from the fact that the engine stops running. Some operating modes begin to go wrong and so on. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel. And all the best to you. See you again.